Welcome to Learn at Work, a webinar series presented by the journal Work, a journal of prevention, assessments, and rehabilitation, which is published by iOS Press. We're so delighted that you can join us today. My name is Dr. Karen Jacobs, and I'm the founding editor of the journal Work. We'll move to the next slide, and I'm going to turn the presentation over to our two speakers. Welcome.
Thank you, Karen. My name is Shira Alon-Chamovitz. First of all, I want to really thank you for the opportunity to talk about this important topic that is very dear to our hearts. I'm here with Yoav Kraim, who would introduce himself in a second. I'm an occupational therapist and a licensed service accessibility expert. I've been working as an occupational therapist for many, many years. I was the head of the founder and head of the occupational therapy program at Ono Academic College in Israel, and I'm currently the head of our Center for Academic Equality and Inclusion. And Yoav?
I'm Yoav Kraim. I am a co-manager co-manager of the social change unit in Bet Easy Shapira, which is an organization who gives services for people with disabilities. I'm advising for the health ministry on policy on rehabilitation for people with psychosocial disabilities, and I'm teaching with Shira and others at Ono Academic College. I'm with cerebral palsy and learning disabilities myself, and I'm activist and working on policy making since I was 15 years old.
And Yoav, thank you for reminding me that I also wanted to mention that I'm an activist working for the rights of people with disabilities. Did it some part of the time at my position as a consultant to the Israeli Commissioner on Equal Rights for people with disabilities. What we're going to be talking about today, deconstructing hierarchies, service users as co-teachers in OT education. And the way we built our webinar today is in a way modeling the way that we teach our class, what we're going to be talking about. So we're going to start.
Before we will start, I would like to apologize before the listeners on my English because my learning disability and the fact that English is not my first language and I can't read or write even in Hebrew, so I have a very, very rusty English, and I may need some help with the vocabulary, and I may not be accurate, and Shira will help me to define what I want to say.
And that would also be a way of modeling part of the way that we co-teach together. So what we're going to be talking about today is we're going to very briefly talk about OT pedagogy. Then we're going to briefly discuss the medical versus social model, which is the conceptual basis of what we're doing. We will then describe a little more in detail the partnership model that we are working on with our students. And then we will end with talking about service users in OT education in general. So to start with OT pedagogy, when we look at traditional OT pedagogy, we're used to seeing a lot of discussion around medical diagnosis, mainly based on theoretical knowledge. Today we are very insisted on looking for all the evidence-based knowledge that we need. And we also usually combine it with applied knowledge. that is more practice-based. But both these knowledge bases are really looking at the professional knowledge base. On the other hand, within OT as a profession, we tend to view ourselves as very client-centered, very collaborative. And what we would like to do in this lecture today, in this webinar today, is to ask some questions about that. To what extent is our OT education really representing our client-centered mode, or our attempt to be very collaborative as OT practitioners? So to start this discussion, we would like to talk about the medical versus social model very briefly.
Okay. The medical model that I grew up in as a person who gets treatment is in effect see us as a person who has tragedy, and our whole life is kind of tragedy because of our disability. We have a responsibility to repair ourselves, to be normalized, and to cope in a way that society requires from anybody, to be consistent with the values and norm of
functioning.
To be independent in a very simple meaning of the term, and the therapist is help us to be repaired, and this is going versus the social model, the new social model, who really look at things from a human rights point of view, and claimed, and I think proved, that the disability not come from our medical situation, rather as the society sees us, the boundaries the society build that don't let us to function as we are. And we in the social model try to build a positive identity with the disability, and to reclaim ownership on our life in terms of making our own decision, decide what help we need, from who we need it, and to be in control, to be autonomous and not just independence.
And in a way, part of what we are doing here in our collaborative teaching is really bringing the voice of people with disabilities into occupational therapy education. So when we talk about collaborative pedagogy, the definition of co-teaching is when two or more teachers are planning and teaching and assessing the same students. Now, we all know this model in many lectures and many courses, where you have one lecturer doing one part of the class and another one doing another part of the class. Sometimes they have some dialogue between them and are collaborating, and sometimes they just do it independently in different part of the course. And then you have, all the way at the end, you have simultaneous teaching, when you have two teachers, two lecturers in the class at the same time, building the course together, teaching it together, and assessing the students together. And this is the model that we are working with. So really, our collaborative pedagogic model is one that incorporate service users as co-teachers. And what we will do now, we will talk a little bit about the goal of this model, the means that we have been using it as a case study to present it. We'll talk about the process of how we did it at Ono Academic College. And we talk a little bit about the outcomes, about the results of using this model. So to start with, when we think about our goal of the partnership model that we have developed, is really about developing true partnership and collaboration within OT intervention.
Is to really understand that there is a couple of bases of the knowledge, and okay, and we have a voice to bring into the classroom, and to really be certain person-centered, you have to learn how to listen and how to respond to what you are listening from the person, and how to make a real dialogue. And we try to be a model of how to do it afterwards in the field.
So I believe that within OT as a profession nowadays, we all agree that we are really striving towards true partnership and collaboration within our intervention. And the question is, to what extent do we really get there? Do we really see the person? Do we really listen to the person? Do we really hear the person that we are working with, that we are providing services to? So as you have said, part of what we're doing, part of our means within the partnership model is using the co-teaching for modeling this type of collaboration between service users and service provider, by providing very strong voices to both sides. Another part that we use, and we will elaborate a little bit more about it later, is using the knowledge that comes from disability studies, looking both at critical pedagogy and social models. The other mean that we're using is using dialogue within the classroom, whether it's between us as co-teachers or with our students, and we will also elaborate about that. And by providing a very strong place and voice and representation to service users, which we will also elaborate a little bit later.
And because we believe that the most significant tool that the therapist has is himself and the connection he builds with the service user. And we started out as only me talking about myself, and through the courses she has started to talk about herself and about her experience, not her academic knowledge, because we understood that the connection that become between the two parties is the most significant tool for achieving the goal of the treatment.
So in order to give a little bit more presence to what we're talking about, we will describe the classes that we, as I mentioned before, we develop them together and we teach them together.
Okay, and the first one called person and family.
Learning with service users, person and family.
Okay, and in this first course we try to help the student have a reflection on what they think about disability, what disability makes them feel, and how they reply to meeting with disabilities. After that, they meeting people with disability, and they also have
hands-on experiences.
Hands-on experience of disabilities, and they really try to understand what it means for what is the variety of experiences of living with a disability, and after that we do the same things on how it feels to be a member of a family that have a person with disability inside of this family in any role, because when we think usually about family, we think about children, and the parents are not with disability and the child is with disability, and we as disabled people become older and become husbands and wife and become parents ourselves, and we want to have the whole picture, so and help the student understand that to be part of a family system is to take part on all roles.
Right. And also we need to remember that we're talking about all type of disabilities. We're talking also about acquired disabilities. And part of what the students are experiencing is the fact that it can happen to anybody, and that's part of life. People with disabilities are part of our everyday humanity. And so that is part of the general experience. Just to give a brief understanding of what the course looks like, it's a semester-long course, but it is not taught every day, but it is taught as workshops. We have between 4 and 5 workshops throughout the semester. And part of the reason that we do it, and we'll talk about it a little bit later when we talk about students' feedback, is that it is a very hands-on and experiential course, and in order to get immersed in the experience, we need the time to be able to do that. So it's not a one and a half hour class and then we go away. We have a whole day working together, talking, dialoguing, doing things, experiencing things in the class.
And because we respect experience, the experience of the students is crucial. It has the same values as our experience and what we have to say, and we not talk about dialogue, rather doing dialogue with the students
throughout the entire series of courses. So what we described now was the first course, Learning with Service Users, Person and Family, and this course is given in the first year of a BOT program. Then the second course is within their second year of studies in the OT program. And this course is called Learning with Service User Advocacy and Social Responsibility. The course is built along the same lines of workshops, except the students have a lot more independent work within as part of the course.
Actually, the students have to try to cope with the will to do social change in some area that they choose and they experience it. It has real. It is really important because two things. First of all, we believe that in order to help the person regain control on his life. He has to learn to advocate for himself. The first one he will advocate against might be the service provider. So they have to understand it, and they have to encourage it. Not only respect it, encourage it, and that's one part. The other part is to understand that policy shape how they work and think and give the services, and how the person with disability living his life and in terms of accessibility and service that he gets and barriers that he has to overcome, and to understand it and to try to overcome the barriers in the everyday life, and maybe to try to change it and to acknowledge that they have power to reshape society.
Which is not a given for occupational therapy students or occupational therapists in general. Part of what we would like the students to experience throughout this advocacy experience is really understand that they have a responsibility, and they also have the ability to take part and be activists in providing change. And by allowing the students to really, the core of the class is groups of students choosing a topic that they feel strongly about, because part of the core of advocacy and part of the core of activism is working on something that you think and you feel that needs to be changed. It's not just a theoretical exercise.
It's going back to the question that we ask in the models: who is to blame? Who is who is responsible on the disability or the situation that the person live in? And we in that course exercise the ability to really understand how society is responsible, and how society has the power and should have the commitment to reduce barriers.
And we will discuss some of the dilemmas that we have around the course, or the questions that rise from the course towards the end of the webinar. The third course in this series is called Learning with Service Users, Discussion and Negotiation in the Therapeutic Process. And this course, in a way, brings all the issues that we've tried to work on, whether it's acknowledging the disability experience, acknowledging the voice of people with disabilities, acknowledging families, and advocacy, and bringing it back into the therapeutic process, and really enabling the students to look at what they are doing. By that stage, this course is given in their third or fourth year of study, after they've already been to at least 2 fieldwork experiences. And they look at their experience within the fieldwork, each in their own clinical setting, and try to look at it through the eyes of negotiation and discussion, and what we would like to think is true collaboration within the therapeutic intervention.
Something else is happening in this course. If in the first 2 we talk about the identity, or the positive identity of the service user, in this course we talk about the professional identity of the service provider. we try to help them to develop, to shape the really beginning of a professional positive professional identity, and in a sense what they could do, and how it's part of who they are, and how to bring themselves into the dialogue.
So until now, we've described the series of courses that we co-teach together, and now we will briefly talk about some of the models that we're using. And our first source that we're building on is disability studies, applying critical pedagogy principles, acknowledging and reducing power differentials, and incorporating the voice of people with disabilities within the OT education.
Well, we acknowledge that between service provider and service users, or in the old term,
patient and therapist.
Patient and therapist, there is a very, very clear hierarchy of power, and the baseline was that we as a patient need to do what we are told in order to repair ourselves, and this is experience of oppression, and therapy could be in that sense not only not useful, something that brings down the patient, and we want to help both of the partners on the treatment to be free from that power situation, and help them to really understand how to build a positive connection.
Okay. I think as an occupational therapist at the beginning, when I was first exposed to disability studies idea and to the ideas of the power differentials, it was very difficult for me to accept, because I went into occupational therapy like many other occupational therapies and other health professions and helping professionals in general, thinking that I am here to help people, and I am here to do good. And when somebody tells me that my intervention might actually be harmful, it's a very difficult thing to listen to. It's a very difficult thing to accept. But when I started thinking about it and realizing that really when we go into the therapeutic experience, unless I really do a very conscious effort to bring down this power differential and to really be there with the person that I am working with and be truly accepting of their attitudes and ideas and preferences, and realizing that that is what I'm looking for within the collaboration, that is when I realized that it is we have to talk about it with the students so they can realize that it's there, so they can actually do it differently.
Another thing that critical pedagogies require is to understand that nothing has to be taken
taken for granted.
Taken for granted as them in a sense that this is how it should be, and we always have to have the courage to ask questions and to doubt what we know and to rebuild our knowledge.
And really, when we talk about incorporating the voice of people with disabilities, this is a very strong call within disability studies. People are talking about nothing about us without us, meaning that we really have to be part of anything, or people with disabilities have to be part of anything that is concerned with them. And we will talk about it a little more later. But really, the way we bring it into our class is by looking at service user in OT education, not as specimen, but as lecturers, as educators, as part of the educational system, as opposed to looking at specimen, because throughout the entire history of occupational therapy, I would say, we had case studies. We brought people, we brought patients into the class to learn about them. What we are doing now is we're learning with them, and that makes a very big difference. It also changes.
We're learning from them.
We're learning from them, and we're learning with them. I believe that we do both.
Yeah.
I believe that we do both, and I think that in a way is another way of modeling the equalization of the power differential when we bring that into the classroom. So really, in a more general way, what we are trying to provide in our classes, and what is maybe the most important take-home message that we would like you to take from this webinar, is that when we talk about professional knowledge and we talk about lived experience knowledge, we are really talking about two bases of knowledge that have equal importance and equal weight in the creation of the new and dynamic knowledge that the students have to develop as occupational therapists to be. Want to say something?
Yeah.
Okay. So to summarize the partnership model, really what we are looking at is using co-lecturers with and without disabilities, or for now, using a dialogic pedagogy. As we mentioned before, we're not only creating the dialogue between us as lecturers, we're also creating a dialogue with our students, and we're also creating a dialogue with guest lecturers that come into the class. As we mentioned before, we bring in a lot of voices of various service users.
And on that, we have to really make a point that they are aware of all the process. They become into the classroom in one point, but they know what was before them and what would be after them. They're part of the process. They're not a guest in the course, and they know it, and the students know it and feel it through the lectures. And that's in order to not be in the old place that Shira talked about before.
As a specimen, but really be part of the educational process. So when we talk about our courses and our teaching, we believe that they have very critical clinical relevance. We talk about creating partnership, we talked about creating collaboration, we talked about being client-centered. And in a way, what we can add here is that when we talk about our OT intervention and our OT process as being evidence-based, we have to remember that part of creating the evidence is also collaborating with service users, is doing participatory action research that bring the service users into the process of developing the evidence that that we use within our therapeutic processes. So really, when we talk about the outcomes of the partnership model, and we're talking about a dialogical educational process, what we are hoping to create, and we will talk about student feedback in a minute, is we are hoping that our OT students become change agents. They become change agents within the clinical setting that they get to, even within their fieldwork experience, and they become change agents once they graduate and start practicing as occupational therapists.
They have to understand that they are agents of society anyhow. If they don't make change, they really the one who keep the old situation alive. So they, in order to be really person-centered, they have to be for change.
And if we said earlier that disability studies and activism within the disability world is talking about nothing about us without us, really today develops into anything about us with us. And that whether it would be the educational process of people that are going to be working, providing services to people with disabilities, whether it's meeting and conferences, is any type of knowledge gathering, whether it's accessibility, when we talk about how accessible is our educational process, how accessible is our society. Obviously, anything that has to do with human rights, with disability rights, has to be engaged together in a way led by people with disabilities.
And anything about us with us should be with all type of disabilities, even the ones that some still think that they cannot take part of decision making, such as severe psychosocial disabilities or intellectual disabilities. They need to be part, and we have to make an effort and to find a way to make all processes accessible for them also.
Which leads us perfectly into talking about our partnership model outcomes in terms of some of the professional and ethical dilemmas that we have experienced throughout the classes, as well as student feedbacks. I think in terms of our ethical and professional dilemmas, when we first started teaching the class, which was 8 years ago, that was our first class, was 8 years ago. We've been teaching these classes for the past 8 years. They've never been the same from year to year. They keep changing because, as we said, it's a dynamic, dialogic process. But at the beginning, we were very, we brought our opinion and our attitudes very strongly from the beginning of the class. And what happened is that as the courses kept going, we realized that sometimes by doing that, we actually inhibit true dialogue. Okay, because what happened, if the students hear in the class that we say so strongly that we have to accept any person and that disability is part of the general human experience, the chances that one of them would actually get up and say, but wait a minute, it's not exactly the same, if they really think so, is very well,
we wasn't critical, as what we did is we were saying the old way is not the right way, our way is the new right way, and this is to do the same thing on opposite opinion.
Which is why when we build the courses now, we try to really enable students to bring up. We tell the students from the start, there is nothing that you cannot say in this classroom, even if it's not politically correct, even if you think maybe it's not the right way, you can still say anything you should say anything, and that is what we are hoping that would happen here. And when we look at students' feedback and we look at the discussions that are developing within the classroom, we can see that students are bringing up more ideas and opinions that are variable.
And even on the assignment, they get a grade. We don't check what they say. We try to really understand how they justified what they say, and we try to make with that a dialogue also.
Another dilemma that we experienced throughout the years is that in a way we saw a change in the power differential that we talked about before, where the students at some point started disregarding the professional knowledge and developed the concept or the idea or the attitude that the only knowledge that really counts is the lived experience knowledge.
And not only that, the individual lived experience, so you cannot make any principle of professionalism.
And so what we're trying to do now is we're trying to bring this also as a dialogue. We bring up the idea that we need to look at both knowledge bases, that they each have their value, and as professionals we are supposed to be able to hold both knowledge bases and really combine them and not give one precedence over the other, in order to get to that more general categorical thinking that Yoav was mentioning.
In order to do so, we do a reflection on ourselves, and we try to look back even on the models, and we discovered that there is very significant part of the medical model in bringing hope into the discussion, because if you believe you can repair someone, there is hope, and this is very significant contribute that this model bring into our professional world, and so we don't see it as black and white anymore.
It's really a sequence, and in a way I think what we have been trying to demonstrate here is also the dialogic process that we have been going throughout these courses, because we keep learning all the time. We keep learning with our students, we keep learning with our guest service users, and we keep learning from each other and developing that knowledge base that we talked about. Would you like to say something to conclude?
I only want to say that the main issue is to the professional therapist be aware of the significance of the dialogue, and the significance to understand the
context.
The context of the person that treats life, and work within in that context, and not on what he believes should be done.
And I would like to end with actually a feedback from our students that said that both the co-teaching model and the experience of learning with a disabled co-teacher brings the message home loud and clear. Thank you very much for your listening and attention. And now we will be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. This was so interesting. And I thought that observing, listening to your collaboration in real time was great. I could just imagine being in your classroom and how important it is for the students to see such collaboration and dialogue back and forth like this. Thank you both. So just a couple of questions. Now, you've been doing this class for 8 years, and you shared some of the lessons learned, and people are going to have the opportunity to listen to this webinar. What advice can you give to, say, another occupational therapy program that hears this, gets inspired, and wants to start this partnership model? What advice could you give to another, university, college about doing this?
Well, because I'm doing it with another, in another college with another partners, what I learned through all my experience that you need to talk before you get into the classroom. You need to be connected with the person that you do it. Shira and I talked for 3 years before we get into a classroom in the first time. I did it also with another partners of mine. You have to be really connected and really have to be honest with each other, because Shira and I don't always agree, and we argue a lot, and we argue in front of the students also, because we want them to see that there is no right or wrong way. There is there is right or wrong in terms of you doing dialogue or not, and to really be connected before you are teaching together.
I completely agree with you, Av, on that. I think that enabled us to go into the classroom from day one much more prepared. And I think the other advice that I would think about is that you have to be willing to let go a little bit of your position of knowing or knowledge within the classroom with the students. It's not an easy thing to do, even if in other places or in other courses where you teach your knowledge base as an occupational therapist, you tend to do it, and even if there you are asking questions and enabling dialogue, when you co-teach, and especially when you co-teach in this combination where you're going into areas where sometimes you feel less safe about, realizing that it's okay. And I think going back to what you have said, by developing the connection ahead of time, it enables you to feel safer within the class with the students, knowing that you'll be able to provide them with the tools within that context.
Thank you. Thank you. So, do you think...
Maybe just another thing. It can't be any person with disability because he has disability. It needs to be someone that have some ability of looking at things.
Looking at the general picture.
it's not enough that you are disabled. You need to have some knowledge about the things yourself. And if you don't find something like with it, so learn together before you get into the class. It would be part of the connection I talked about before, but the person with the disability has to have some general knowledge and not only bring himself.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you. So it's very clear that communication is key. Here's where I want to ask another question. Is there, because this is offered in Israel, do you think that you would find cultural differences if, say, this was introduced in Canada or the US? Would you teach it any differently, or do you think the same approach, same concept, the need for communication is generalizable?
I think the need for communication is generalizable. I think where you might find the cultural differences is the willingness to let go of political correctness. I think part of the reason that enabled us to do it in Israel is that we tend to be more open and forward and outgoing in a way. And that might be my stereotypes going into the picture, but as one who lived in the United States for a couple of years and both studied and taught in the United States, I think there might be more of a gap in enabling an open, a completely open discussion. And there I would take into account maybe taking actions like providing perhaps more exercises or something that would enable people to bring up their opinions maybe anonymously, writing them down and then opening it up together and bringing it up this way gradually to work towards an open discussion and an open dialogue.
Well, I know that there is a model like this in the States in terms of a sociology course on racism, where a lecturer is an African American and a white lecturer, and what I read on that when a student hear a white student hear the African American lecturer, they feel blamed. They feel he blamed them on the history and make them to take responsibility on the past. And I think the main issue here to not judge any part of the partnership, and really really to understand that we start from the beginning right now, and from what I learned, it's more difficult to do in the States. In Israel, we always invent ourselves. We always invent ourselves. It have its good things and its bad things because nothing is really established.
Thank you. Thank you both so very much for sharing your expertise, your collaboration, your enthusiasm. This has been such a special webinar, and I know that many people will thoroughly enjoy listening to it. We'll need to conclude now, but I want to thank you both so very much. This was such a great conversation, and I feel inspired. So thank you.
And thank you, Karen, for the opportunity to provide this webinar through work.
Well, Thank you. And everybody, thank you for joining us. And as you know, you can subscribe to the Learn at Work YouTube channel, where you can listen to this Learn at Work webinar and others. So thank you for joining us today.